Hello, YouTube viewers. Welcome to End of Life University. I have for you in this video a very interesting interview I did with Matthew Van Drimmelen. He's the founder of a company called Full Circle Aftercare, and they provide help for people who are dealing with estate issues, who need to close accounts, all kinds of paperwork issues that crop up after the death of a loved one. And you'll learn all about how they help survivors through those issues. And they're really doing a great service in the world. So I'm excited for you to learn more about Matt and his company. So take a listen and see what you think. Today, I'm very happy to be welcoming my special guest, Matthew Van Drimmelen. Matt is the owner and founder of Full Circle Aftercare, a company he created to help people deal with the stress and worry of settling estate issues after the death of a loved one. And I'm really excited to learn more about this from Matt. And you can read more about Full Circle Aftercare at their website, full-circlecare.com. So Matt, welcome and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Karen. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions for you about how your company works, but I wanted to start by just having you tell us your story and what inspired you to create Full Circle Aftercare.
Absolutely. So my background is my dad kind of came from kind of the rags to riches story. He came from nothing, absolute abject poverty. Never even had a bathroom his whole childhood growing up, and he was able to create his kind of own business and company. And I served a mission for my church, and then went into engineering because I really loved building things. And out of college, I ended up working for government work doing right-of-way. So I would build a lot of transit projects. We did like an airport tracks line here, and I was on the real estate side of things. And I realized that at least the government jobs that I had, it became kind of a cesspool of mediocrity. Not a lot. I got reprimanded several times because I was working too much and because I was too effective at my job and setting unrealistic expectations for other people that work there. And I just kind of got sick of it. I loved my work, but I wanted something new. And I had a friend who worked in the funeral industry, and we went to lunch, and he was telling me about this need that families have, how funeral homes really take care of this need of dealing with the body and dealing with that loss of connection and having services. But there's this other unspoken need that families have of closing out all the accounts and all the personal affairs of their loved one, and funeral homes don't have the time or know how to do it. And I was like, well, but that's what attorneys do. And he's like, well, yeah, an attorney will do big things, but they're not going to do the little things. And he's like, I think it could be its own business. I think this could be a service for its own business. And I went home that night and I couldn't sleep and thought about it for the next 2 days. And I called him. I'm like, we have to do this. We have to create this business for people. I think it would be useful. And so we started it. We kind of spun our wheels for a couple of years. He trained me everything that needed to happen for families, but he was so focused on his other business, we just didn't go anywhere. And so finally in 2016, I said, you know what, let me just take it. And so I bought him out, and since then it's been great. We're now in 35 states. This month we hope to, looks like we're on track to help somewhere around 1,400 families. So we've been able to grow a little bit and help a lot of families, and it's been a wonderful journey all along the way.
Wow. Wow. That's really interesting. And it made me remember when my parents died. I didn't live in the same state they lived in. My brother did. And I know he took care of all of tying up everything in their estate. And he would tell me he spent hours and hours every day, which I was astounded. I had no idea there could be that much. And all the visits he made to banks and all the phone calls he made and how overwhelming it was. And I felt a little bad I wasn't able to help him with any of it. But prior to that time, I had no idea that there could be that many issues to take care of after
Right.
a death.
Well, and I really kind of break it down to two problems. The first one is, yes, there's a lot to do. And mostly, we've never done this before. It's not our own personal life. So I relate this a lot to people when I explain what we do. Like, when was the last time you moved? You move, you put all your stuff in boxes, you get the truck, you go to the new location, you think you're done. You're not. All of a sudden, you got to think of all the people you have to notify that you moved your address. I mean, IRS, you got to change on your driver's license, you got to call all the credit cards and your banks, and you might have had loans, you might have, other obligations or subscriptions, and so many people have your address, and that's just your address has to be changed. And you think so much of that has to be done for these families when someone dies. All of those things that you would have to address when you move would have to be done when someone passes away, plus about 10 times more. And so families don't know what to do because they've never done it before, and it's probably not their own accounts and stuff. And the second problem is the emotional toll it takes
Mhm.
of, calling up over and over again saying, my mom died or my husband died, and trying to get through that can be very, very difficult.
And especially when people are grieving, it's they don't necessarily have the focus and the concentration to really dive into these issues. And I can imagine it's confusing and completely overwhelming for them. So walk me through, how would it work if I needed your services and were to call you if I were one of your clients? What happens and how does it work?
Absolutely. So typically we white label our service under other businesses because I don't really want to be an ambulance chaser, and we don't make enough money to keep our prices low enough. So to advertise to someone who just lost a loved one would be difficult directly. So we work with funeral homes, hospices, and estate attorneys, and they usually either provide or pay or include our services with their fees. And so for the family we're serving, it's free. So what will happen is, the funeral home will send us a report of, this is this family, here's the person that they lost, and they need our help. And so we would call that family up and say, hey, I'm here to help you with all the next steps. This is a free service to you. And we would usually schedule an appointment. We like to reach them right away so that they know that we're there for them if they have any questions. We usually schedule our appointment 1 to 3 weeks after the death has occurred. And through that process, let me show you kind of a binder that someone wrote down everything that needs to happen. This is another funeral home competitor. And they have this big binder that they
Oh my
sell
gosh.
families for $500. This huge binder, and it kind of walks the families through like what all those next steps are, and it's pretty comprehensive. But I don't want to go through a 4-inch binder right now, and I'm not grieving, right?
Yeah.
And so what I find is families get these and they never take the shrink wrap off because who wants to go through all that? So what our process is condensing all of that information down to specifically, what do you have to deal with? So we ask a series of questions, understand, were they a veteran, or were they receiving Social Security benefits? Did they have retirement accounts? Did they have debts? And we kind of go through and we narrow it down of what exactly needs to be done. And then we create a manageable plan, right? Here's the next steps. So Karen, for you to close out your husband's estate, we have these 12 things that need to be done. And once those are done, I think you'll be taken care of. And then we offer to the family, say, would you like to do this on your own? I can give you the phone numbers and send you the forms, or would you like us to help? And most families ask us to help. And in that case, we would just do like 3-way conference calls or sometimes online forums. and we would help notify each and every one of the government organizations, financial institutions, and close out all those accounts, transfer it to the beneficiary, and kind of do those next steps. The only limitation for what we can't do is we're not attorneys. We're not trying to be. So if it gets into the legal side of things, we have to stop helping them and kind of guide them, say, yeah, at this point, you need an attorney to help you with these next steps. We're also not financial planners. So I can't give them financial advice or what to do with money that's rolled over and how to do that exactly. And I'm not a tax advisor. So sometimes we need other professionals to step in and give them advice on what to do, but we will kind of help drive the engine of actually doing those next steps, through those three-way conference calls, through filling out paperwork, and guiding them through that next step.
Hmm. That's very interesting. I know one thing that happened after my mom died. She died after my father, and there were things we just didn't know about her that she was doing when she lived alone. She apparently she was ordering vitamins from a number of different companies on auto ship. And we didn't know anything about that. We had no idea. And so it was like a month after she died, my brother said he was driving by her house and he saw these boxes on the front porch. Like, what is this? And opened them up. They were all full of vitamins that
Oh my
had
gosh.
been continued to be shipped after she died because we didn't even know it was happening. So I'm curious, are there often hidden surprises like that that families
Oh,
discover?
all the time. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we don't limit our service to like one or two phone calls, because families will find something and then call us back and be like, oh, we found out this. One big thing, you talk about vitamins, but the VA will mail medications all the time. And sometimes those are controlled substances, right? And so, as those are coming in, we have to make sure that they're dealt with in the proper manner, in order to get that shut off and sent back, so that the family doesn't get in trouble of receiving, a controlled substance that that they shouldn't have access to, and so it can cause a big mess for these families, if they're not handled properly.
And I suppose now you're used to looking for evidence of those things. Cause I wonder if we had paid more attention to her credit card statements, we might have seen charges that would have made us think about that or wonder.
Right, right. And so a lot of times it's like doing I feel like we're private investigators. We're having to figure out everything. And sometimes it's because the family doesn't know anything. We helped a gentleman who had an estranged brother. He was living up in Portland, and the brother was down in Dallas, Texas. The brother passed away, and we called the brother who's in Portland, who is still surviving, and he's like, I haven't talked to my brother in 30 years, and I know nothing about his life at this point. And so at that point, we're starting to investigate. And oh, one more problem is the house caught on fire and burned down. So there were no
Oh
physical
my gosh.
documents of anything. And so he had to do some things on his end. We were doing things on our end, pulling credit reports, trying to find open accounts, open insurance, and close out what we could, because it was difficult. On the other end, some people might have access to those, but they're just not very well educated. The most common of that is, you know, oftentimes in the baby boomer generation, you would have more of a division of responsibilities between spouses. One spouse would do the finances, one spouse did, you know, something else. And so when the spouse passed away who did the finances, the other one is like, I know this is our life, but I've never paid a bill before. I don't even know where we bank, and so it is difficult kind of going through that. I had a situation kind of like that with a really young family. So this was back in the Afghanistan war. Young military family. They had three small children. They got married in high school, or right out of high school. And she was living across the country from any family or friends. So he was deployed and ended up getting sick, terminally ill, while in Afghanistan. So he gets home. She quits her job. She's just full time taking care of him as he's on his deathbed and the three little kids. And he ended up passing away. And I called her a couple days later and she was in hysterics, as you can imagine. And the thing that really broke the camel's back was her landlord had come over and said, look, I know you were living off of his income. And if you're not going to be able to make rent payments, you might as well move out now.
Oh my gosh.
Which I was like, what a heartless,
Yeah,
horrible
that's
person.
horrible.
So she just lost her husband. She has zero source of income. And she's just young and a little naive on how everything worked. And so she's looking at possible homelessness and what to do with these kids. And I said, that's not going to happen. We're going to walk you through this. And I helped her understand what's available to her through Social Security, through VA benefits. And I remember in about 3 hours, it took us to kind of go through everything. And at the end of the 3 hours, she had about $1,700 a month coming in. That was steady. It was going to come in for the next while. We found a $5,000 life insurance through the VA. And we ended up even helping her with some local support for, we did food stamps, we did some other support to help her and her kids moving forward, and childcare so she could find a job. And I remember at the end of those 3 hours, she's like, when this started, I thought there was no hope. But now I know I can do this. And like just getting through that, getting like a plan in place and helping guide her, that was one of the most rewarding calls I've ever been able to have, knowing, because she knew nothing. And you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. And so you have the advantage of lots of experience. I mean, and so you have lists in your head probably of all the things that other people don't think of, but
Right.
you're also objective. You're not emotional because you are not experiencing this yourself. So you can really give good guidance to people along
Right.
the way about, did you think of this? Have you tried this? Have you done that?
Right. Well, it's like my wife teaches ballet part-time. So this is my family right here. We
Ah,
have 6 little kids.
beautiful. Wow.
They're ages 14 to 3. So 4 girls and 2 boys. But my wife was a big dancer. She performed in college, and so she still teaches part-time. And a couple months ago, the owner of the ballet studio where she works, her husband passed away. And Marquesa, my wife, calls me and she goes, will you call her and just help her with, offer her our services? I said, absolutely. So I call her up and I say, hey, I don't know if you know what I do, but this is what I do. And she's like, oh, that would be helpful. I can't really talk right now because I'm at the bank. And I was like, what are you doing at the bank? And she's like, I was just going to let him know that my husband passed away. And I was like, oh, okay. Step out of line, turn around, walk out the door right now. She's like, why? And I'm like, just do it. I'll explain when you get outside. So she turns around, she walks outside, and she goes, what's going on? And I was like, listen, you are going to cause a world of problems. I'm like, is the same place you bank personally also where you do business banking? She's like, yes. And I'm like, was he on all of your accounts? She's like, yes. I'm like, here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk in there and you're going to say, a principal on this account just passed away, and the bank will freeze everything.
Mm.
So next week, when you have to make payroll, you can't. When you have to collect funds coming in, you can't. When you have to pay your electrical bill at the dance studio and everything else, you can't. When you need to pay your own bills, you won't be able to. I'm like, you have to plan this out first before that happens so that when they do get notified, everything's already transferred over and you're not going to miss a beat. And she's like, I never would have known. And I can't tell you how many families we've run into, they just didn't know what they didn't know. And so they start doing things and they end up causing a world of work and pain for themselves, and make a little problem much, much bigger because they didn't know the right timing, they didn't know who to contact, and it just spiraled.
Wow, even hearing you tell that story, I wouldn't have had any idea that that timing matters, and in fact the order in which you do things. So that's a really important warning for all of us that we need to be thoughtful as we're
Yeah,
trying to take care of these issues. And I could see why she would think, well, the bank, that's one thing she could think of, like, well, I'll let them know. But
right. Well, there's this idea that when you like, okay, they passed away, suddenly their money's not secure in the bank. And I tell them, no, no, it's just as secure as it was beforehand, right? Just because they passed away doesn't mean like the bank's like, oh, well, whoever wants this money can come get it, right? But somehow we feel like it's not secure there. And so we go and we cause more problems where, yes, you're right, there's an order that has to happen here. Other things need to be closed. There are other things need to be transferred to that survivor's name before you notify the bank so it can immediately have somewhere to turn those assets over to.
and one thing I saw through your website is that you help set up fraud protection. And I was curious about that. Like, what types of fraud might happen after someone dies?
Yeah. So New York Times did an article a couple years ago, and from their research, they found that 2.5 million deceased individuals get their identity stolen every year.
Wow.
2.5 million,
Wow.
which is huge, right? Now, some of
Mhm.
those are from deaths that happened a while ago, but most of them are right away. Oftentimes, it's extended family members.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's caretakers, someone who knew of what's going on, and other times it's just um, bad guys who read obituaries or find out other information. So there's several layers of fraud protection that we try to protect that family from. The first thing we do is we put um, everyone in the family on a 1 year fraud alert because it's free and it should happen. Because right now, with everything changing, they want to make sure nothing's happening that shouldn't be happening. So the deceased individual and all the survivor family members. The next thing we do is we permanently close all the credit accounts through Experian, TransUnion, and make sure that that person's account is closed so nobody can take new credit out. Then we update um, a government list. It's called the deceased registry, and that also that goes to anyone who is working through the government, is regulated by the government, whether it's insurance or a lot of times what will happen is people take out insurance policies or things like that in the name of the deceased. Any kind of credit inquiry, any new loans or new accounts, all have to check this list, and so we put their name on that list to make sure that nothing can happen in that deceased name. Then we put all the phones on do not solicit, right? Because we don't want to do solicitors. And we
Yes.
update the National Direct Mail Association. And what that does is they are the ones who are responsible of keeping those lists up to date on when you get all your junk mail, right?
Hmm.
And junk mail is one of the number one ways that people get their identity stolen at that
Really?
time.
I didn't know that.
It's huge because you'll have like a cousin or whatever, and they'll get all that information's there in that junk mail, pre-approved credit card offer, something like that. So they'll take that, open up an account, start spending it on Uncle Danny's name, and now the family has to deal with this mess.
Wow.
And so we try to stop all as much of the junk mail as we can through updating that, and then just canceling any subscriptions, any online profiles, all of that, getting that over to the family's name will protect them from those kind of next steps.
Wow, that's very interesting. I just had no idea there was that much identity theft going on, but
Unfortunately.
something to really be prepared for and think about in advance.
Well, and some identity theft happens from the family without them meaning to, right? So, and that's just a knowledge thing. Oftentimes you might have a child who was like the power of attorney, and so they keep on operating. Mom was sick and they were handling all of her affairs as power of attorney, and now that she's passed, they think they still have the right to do that. Well, it's power of attorney. Power of attorney means you're representing someone who's alive, right?
Oh,
An
yeah.
executor represents someone who's dead. So power of attorney ends the moment that person passes away
Huh.
and transfers to an executor. And so if they're just operating under a power of attorney, technically, they're often committing fraud in acting in that person's behalf without getting an executorship, which can cause some trouble for that family member down the road. So yeah, there is a process here, and it does need to happen the right way.
Hmm. Interesting. Are there often things that you find out about the family didn't know about? Say, that their loved one owned property somewhere or had investments somewhere that no one knew about?
Those are the really fun ones, right? That's like, hey, guess what? You have a big life insurance policy, or you have an investment account. Yeah, those are great and can be very nice surprises. Yes, absolutely. We uh, we find that out on a pretty regular basis. In fact, we have a little ticker of like unclaimed property, just the unclaimed property that we found. And I think at this point we found over $250,000 for families.
Wow. Wow.
So it's been really, those are the good ones. The hard ones are when you find debt, or you find kind of some secret life of family members that those are hard pills to swallow, because sometimes people make bad decisions and the family is left picking up those pieces. So we'll try and walk them through it, but that's hard sometimes.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I was interested. You said that estate attorneys often utilize your services. So I guess that's evidence right there that there's certain things they don't want to handle and won't handle, but they themselves see the need for it and see how necessary it is for their clients.
Right. Often a lot of the stuff we do are stuff that an attorney doesn't want to do. And if you did have them do it, it'd be way too expensive.
Hmm.
Um, and I'll give you an example. I was hiring a new employee 2 years ago, and the young kid, he's like 22 years old. And in his interview, I was like, okay, it looks like you're great coming on board. Let me explain a little bit more about what we do. And he goes, no, I get it. And I'm like, okay, you're 22. You don't get it.
I don't think so.
You don't get it. He's like, no, no, I get it. And I'm like, okay, tell me your story. And he goes, long story short, best friends in high school, or all growing up, me and my best friend, senior year, he gets mixed up with the wrong crowd, goes off the deep end, starts getting involved in drugs, drops out of high school, living in his parents' basement. A year later, you know, I'm at school and I find out that he's at home and he overdoses and passes away. So he knows, like, his mom was very fastidious. She was very clean freak, and this kid's room was a pigsty. And the first thing she would do is she would go down, clean out his room, and probably find drug paraphernalia and all sorts of junk. And so he went over there, good family friend, and he said, you know what, let me clean his room for you. And the mom was just incredibly grateful. And she said, since he's passed, his cell phone has been ringing off the hook. And every time it rings, I think, is that the person that sold him the drugs
Hmm.
or gave him those drugs? She's like, so I don't want to just power it off. I want the number unavailable. I want it canceled. Right. And so she's like, while you're cleaning this room, I'm going to go in the other room and call Verizon Wireless and close out this phone. So he hears her. She's on speakerphone. She's trying to navigate, press 6 and then 8 and then 2 and hold music. Your call is very important to us. And 40 minutes later, finally a live person comes on, and she's like, Verizon Wireless, how can I help you? And she goes, my son just died, and I need to turn off the cell phone. Well, now this Verizon Wireless employee, young girl, she's not trained on this. She has her script she's reading, and this is a very raw, real situation. It's not a business to business transaction anymore. She panics. Oh my gosh, what happened to him? All the wrong things you
Yeah.
say. And she goes, I think I need to get my supervisor on the phone. So she's waiting. Supervisor comes on the phone. Verizon Wireless, how can I help you? My son died. I need to turn off the cell phone. Unfortunately, you're in the wrong department. Let me transfer you.
Oh
So
no.
then it's this blind transfer, waiting on hold, person picks up, Verizon Wireless, how can I help you? My son just died, right? And this goes on. And he goes, long story short, an hour and a half into it, she hangs up the phone in frustration because she was getting nowhere. And she like let out this like scream. And he goes, I kind of turned around the corner and it was like she was a puddle of water. Like she just melted off the chair onto the floor, just sobbing because it was so emotional, her trying to be this business to business in a very raw, real, horrible situation that she was going through. And he tells me this, and I'm like, okay, you get it. You do get it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's more than just helping you close out accounts. That would be useful for any of us. Someone could help me with decide to cancel cable or whatever, right? All those little things we have to do that are annoying. But dealing with it when you're grieving, it makes such a big difference to these families.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I read that you and your staff often make three-way calls, like you get on the phone with the person,
Right.
partly because you know what to ask or know how to guide the conversation.
Right. And you know, uh, I'll tell a quick story about why that's important of us doing the talking for them. Because yeah, that's exactly what happens. We're doing the talking, that they're listening in. So if they want to jump in with a question or whatever, they can, but then they don't have to say over and over again, my son just died, right? Or my mom just died. So I grew up watching spaghetti westerns. My uncle, who I was at his house constantly, he loved John Wayne. He had this like whole shrine to John Wayne, like
Mhm.
movie prop sets and all sorts of stuff. And so one of the first families I was able to help was this rancher out of Wyoming, and his name was Earl, and he sounded just like John Wayne. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like my childhood cowboy, and he really was a rancher. It was so cool. And his son had been disabled his whole life and passed away at age 22. It wasn't a surprise. They kind of knew eventually that would happen. Um, but the kid had never worked. He had never participated very much in society. So when I go through my checklist of everything there is to help with, it was like this much, that we could do. And and so I go through it. I talked to Social Security benefits. I canceled a credit card that he would use to go buy Slurpees with. I set up some fraud protection. And I go through it and I'm like, you know what, Earl, that's it. You should be done. There shouldn't be anything else you'd have to do. Let me know if there's anything. And it's just silent. And I was like, Earl, are you there? And I can see you're connected. Can you hear me? And he finally comes on. I realize it's silent because he's choked up. I mean, here's Mr. like True Grit, and he's choked up and he's like, Matt, the thing that I've been dreading most is calling up these strangers and calling up these government employees and saying to them that my sweet son passed away.
Mm.
He's like, the fact that you did all that conversation for me and you said it all for me means everything to me. And, and then I'm getting misty eyed. You betcha, buddy. And that point, I realized this is more than the logistics. It's someone holding your hand through the most difficult moments of your life. Of you have to close out these accounts for your loved one, and you shouldn't have to do it alone. And you should have someone who will say those words for you and just take it from you. And you can watch it happen, but you don't have to participate and actually do it yourself.
Wow. I can just imagine how helpful that is because I'm looking back at years and years ago. My father died suddenly by suicide. And so for all of us, we were in shock. We were overwhelmed. And for me, I couldn't even say the word suicide. I couldn't
Yeah.
bear to say it. It was too painful. And so, I mean, my mom had to go through all of that herself, calling people and making all these arrangements. And I don't even know how she did it. I don't know how she ever got through those days, but it would have made a huge difference to have you and your staff available to help with that.
Oh, well, thank you. I wish we could have been there because I think that suicide is by far, suicide and murder are just so hard to deal with. There's just an extra layer of grief, and probably even suicide the worst, because there's an extra layer of grief that is inconsolable. It really is.
Yeah.
And one of the things we really encourage families is like, look, we're taking care of the logistics side of it, but please spend some time with reading some books or talking to a therapist or finding a community, because this whole idea of, the 7 stages of grief is nobody goes through these stages. Stages sounds like, oh, well, I'm gonna feel angry once, and then once I'm done feeling
Yeah.
angry, then I don't feel angry anymore,
Yeah.
right?
Tomorrow I'll move on to the next stage.
Tomorrow I'm at the next stage. I don't have to deal with the stage anymore. Like, that's such baloney. Like, you're gonna feel all of those different things all at once, and then you'll feel nothing. You'll feel numb, and you're like, what's wrong with me? And then all of a sudden it will come rushing back in. And if people don't have guidance, the emotional guidance is what we don't provide. But I just beg families, like, let us do our part, because we'll take a year and a half process and be done in a few hours. But that next process, the emotional piece, is several months or years or a lifetime of learning how to deal with that grief, because that's where you should be focused. You shouldn't be focused on Verizon Wireless. You should be focused on the credit card. You should be focused on these other things. And I did a podcast a while back with a therapist who said some families refuse to close out these accounts
Mm.
because it's a way of holding on to their loved one. Like, well, once that's closed, then it makes it more real or something. And it causes all these problems in their life because they're holding on to something to make it so I'll deal with the grief after these problems are met with.
Mm.
And it happens all the time where we're helping and we start closing everything out and we get to the end, and people are almost like that. All of a sudden all the emotion starts coming, like, okay, I put on a brave face until this point. Now the healing needs to start. And you need some professionals, and you need good books, you need good resources to turn to.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes so much sense to me. And I was thinking how this process that people have to go through, these logistics after a loved one dies, could really re-traumatize them in a way. They're already traumatized by the death, but adds to the trauma, and the fact that you can help protect them from that, at least
Right.
from that component of it, and make that part of it easier for them. That it's dramatic, it seems to me, and I'm just so, I never heard of such a service being available, so I'm really excited to know about it and to be able to tell people about it.
Well, thank you. Well, we really appreciate it. One of the exciting things about our company, I'm going to tell you a story, but I got to tell you why this is important. But um, there's a lot of women in this world who lose out on their career or limit their career because they're caretakers, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes they're caretaking an older parent, and most often it's a child, right? They have to take care of children, and so they can't work full time, or they can't work at all for a number of years. And my wife, that happened to. She was a professor at 22 at the University of Utah, full professor, younger than most of the kids in her class. And when we had our daughter, she's like, I have to be home with her. And I was like, you're giving up a career. You can never come back to this, right? And I started noticing a lot of women who they chose caretaking for a while, and when they go to re-enter the workforce, because they have this huge gap in their resume, no one wants to hire them. And so when I created the company, I said, one of our mission statements is I want to create a launching ramp for these women where we can give them a whole bunch of really unique and interesting experience, so that they can take the experience they get here and the good income that they get here, and they can go leverage that for their next job and say, hey, I can come work for your insurance agency. I've helped 1,200 families close accounts. I know this form, I know how this works. right? And they're like, oh yeah, I'll hire you in a heartbeat. So that became one of our mission statements is we would actively seek after women who are caretakers, stay-at-home moms, or caretaking of someone, and who are looking to re-enter the workforce. And we just interviewed a bunch of them, and we said, if you went back to work, what would it need to be? It needed a flexible schedule, it needed good pay, it needed meaningful work, they needed good social component to it. And so we designed that job specifically around their needs. And I thought I was being very altruistic. And, I was like, yeah, I'm going to help these women out. Well, I was surprised on two things. The first thing was none of them were leaving. I thought that would be a launching ramp to other careers. They don't want to leave because they really like this work. The second thing that surprised me is this became the best business decision we could have ever done. It became our secret sauce because these women are knowledgeable and they're caretakers and they're really intelligent and they're multitaskers. And so families feel it. Like they're not paid to sell anything. They're not trying to get through a checklist real quick. They're just there to help. They're like, how can I help you? And families are like, wow, you just really care about me and my situation right now. And they're holding their hands through this. And it's fun to walk around the office and hear them. You'll walk around one corner, oh, sweetheart, thank you so much for telling me about your husband. He sounds like such a wonderful man. While we were talking, I closed this and I did this and keep going. I'm working on this right now. And there's just that connection and like that whole hand holding. And then on the other side, you'll have Katie on the phone with someone and be like, no, you listen to me, sir. This family's grieving. They need this paperwork today. Can you do that? Or do I need to get your manager on the phone? Right. And like the families feel like this is like this mother hen, like I'm going to protect this family. I'm going to do what it takes to get through it. And in one instance of that, we had a young or a widow right when COVID hit. So she was taking care of her husband. She was helping him out of the tub one day and she slipped and broke her hip. And the next week it was COVID. So she's in the hospital. Family can't come see her. Family doesn't go see him. He passes away. And they can't have a funeral. They can't have a get together. She's all alone in the hospital. So they just did like a little direct cremation for all of for the funeral side of it. Well, the direct cremation company, they never met anyone. They end up putting in, she was the one deceased, not him, when they reported to Social Security.
Oh my gosh.
When they filled out the form wrong. And we've run into that before. So what she needs to do is she needs to go into the Social Security office, show her ID. I'm still alive. That was reported wrong, right? Well, COVID had hit. Social Security was shut down. There were no open offices. She is at her wit's end. So Social Security just freezes everything. It's her only source of income. She is stuck in the hospital still in rehab. She has zero income coming in. She just lost her husband. She can't see her family. And she was distraught. And Kathy's like, we are not going to leave her on her own on this. So Kathy just starts bringing it up the chain of command. And so she starts calling, unbeknownst to me, the Washington, D.C., the senator for Alaska, where this woman lived. She's calling the senator every day until she finally gets someone there. And she's like, you have to help this woman. And next thing I know, I get the call from like one of the very top people at the Social Security Administration. And they're like, we need to get involved and help you with this. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. Tell me what's going on. And I got Kathy involved and we got it all reversed and got her benefits in place. And I was like, that just goes to show what kind of a woman Kathy is. She raised 5 kids. She did everything for her. She had been a social worker. She gave up everything for her family. And then her husband's not quite ready to retire. So she wanted to come back to work for a while. And she's amazing, right? She does this every day. And she's like, I will do whatever it takes to help this family get it taken care of. And it just kind of goes to show like what type of people we are trying to line up to serve these families.
Wow. That's a great story that you hire problem solvers and they're willing to do whatever it takes to solve problems, and that's great. So moms are great problem solvers, so it makes sense to me.
Amen to that. Well, women in general, women are amazing. There's just a natural ability they have as problem solving, as multitasking, and just that caring component that this is often lacking, not in every man, but is often lacking in men. And sometimes we get down to business a little bit too quick, and families need that gentle touch as they're dealing with these difficult times and issues.
Yeah. Well, Matt, the way I heard about your company is through a funeral home in New York that uses your services. And one of their employees wrote to me and said, you need to interview Matt about this company because it's amazing. And they talked, I mean, she just talked glowingly about they're so happy that they can now offer your services to their clients because they always felt at loose ends in the past. They would see people suffering and dealing with all these issues and had no way of helping them. And
Yeah.
so I was really interested that the people you actually negotiate with are funeral homes and hospices. And I was just curious how that works, how they contract with you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have ability, people can come to us directly. And we just do a charge, a flat rate. It's $399. And as long as it takes us to close everything out, that's what it takes, right? But these funeral homes and hospices, they really want to help families through those next steps. And so we have a wholesale price with them. And they just write it into their contract. So funeral homes will usually include it with most of their packages, or for the case that you talked about, every family that comes to that funeral home, they pay for the service out of their pocket, right? That's what they do. Most hospices, they're paying for it out of their pocket as well. And most of our attorneys add it as an add-on feature. People can choose it or not choose it. So yeah, with them, we're just white labeling under them. So for the families, so that funeral home in particular, we represent the funeral home. So from the family's perspective, they have their funeral director who helps them, and then immediately their funeral director passes them off to one of our estate specialists. We say, hey, we're working with the funeral home's estate specialist, and we're here to help you with the next steps. I promise I'll be with you every step of the way to your comfort level. Use me as much as little as you want, but I never charge anything, and there's never any cost to this. It's
Mm.
something the funeral home wants to provide for you. And the only thing the funeral home gets in return is they get the peace of mind knowing that their families are helped and followed up with. I met with a funeral professional who said the hardest moment for him was at the end of the graveside service, where the family's getting into the limo and driving off, and you're giving them a hug and you hand them your card and you say, call me if you need anything. And part of you says, please don't call me because I won't have the time. I have 10 other families I have to go help right now. I don't have the time that you need with those next steps, but also please do call me if you need me, because, and he's like, there's this dichotomy, like I want to help them so much, but I don't know how to do it. And by us partnering with them, we just fill in that next piece. Like, yes, I want to help them, and we have someone already set up who will help you through those next steps. And so the businesses love it. A lot of them tell me it delights their families. Families come into a hospice or a funeral home expecting this level of service, and even if the home does absolute perfection, families expect perfection, right? Like you can mess up my order at the restaurant, but you can't mess up my mom's
Mhm.
funeral,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
there's zero room for error with these funeral homes, and they pull it off over and over and over again. They do perfection for these families, but they're just kind of meeting that expectation. Like, well, that's what I expected you to do. And then when the family gets one extra call and says, no, I'm still here for you, I'm still going to help you with these next steps, families are blown away by it. And so it's good for the funeral home because families can really say, this place is different. It's not like one of these big corporate ones who don't care about families. They really do care about us. And it's also good for just kind of differentiating them and helping those families so that they can focus on the next family.
Yeah. And you're filling a gap that previously wasn't addressed for people. And I was thinking between the death and the funeral, a lot of times families do get a lot of support. That's when everyone shows up and brings in food, and there are people there asking, what can I do to help you? Once the funeral's over, though, those support people start disappearing, and that's when the reality hits the family. We have all these things we have to take care of, and
Right.
then they feel alone at that point. There's nobody there offering them the support they got before. So I really see this tremendous need for what you offer, and what a wonderful service it is.
I'm glad you said that. I remember one of the ladies I was talking to early on when we were starting this out, and she said she buried her husband, and they were driving away from the graveside service, and it's in the limo, and so the whole family's in there, and they're all talking. She's like, everyone's saying, wasn't that so beautiful? Oh, I love what Pastor Mike said, beautiful words, and we love this. And she's like, the whole time they're talking, all of a sudden this new reality came, and I couldn't even participate because I was like, that was the end for them. This is just the beginning for me.
Mhm.
And she's like, the only thing that kept on coming through my mind was, now what? What's next? Now what do I do? How am I going to deal with this? And she's like, and then you called me on Monday morning and said, I'll be with you. I'll help you get everything moved over and get those next steps. She's like, it was heaven sent, because she's like, we don't talk with our kids about our finances, So she didn't know who to turn to, and you're right. It can be very, very lonely for these poor grieving widows, widowers, parents, children.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Well, I have a different sort of question for you. Is that, do you ever I was talking about earlier about how your objective, so you're not grieving, but after hearing so many stories, does it ever kind of weigh on your heart? Do you ever feel some of the grief and the pain for people? And then how do you deal with that?
That's a great question. Yeah, it's definitely not as raw for us. And I was worried about that, like that we'd be more sad. Uh, and in fact, a lot of people ask me this question. They say, how do you deal with it all the time? How do you deal with death all the time? And I say, do you feel the same about doctors? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, doctors dealing with sick people and death constantly, all day long, every day. And like, yeah, but they're helping it. I'm like, yeah, it's the same thing with us. Like, yes, there are those moments. There's the tragedies that
Mhm.
are really, really hard, right? Big ones are suicide, murder, and just tragic events. And those ones are hard for everyone because it's just sad. But there is a little bit of peace that comes in saying, at least I can do this for the family. At least I can make sure that they're taken care of, and there's nothing that they won't be taken advantage of by anyone else. So there's almost an empowering, like the sadder it is, the more empowered we feel to, I'm going to do whatever it takes to help this family. There's a few times, one of our state specialists had a situation where her son was in an accident and accidentally killed. Um, he was at fault, and the other motorist passed away, and that was very, very difficult for them. And so when there's similar circumstances to that, she deals with it, and we have a few widows on our staff, and sometimes there's some raw emotions there. And I think that's the component of, we do have therapists that come in and talk to us and help us with those.
Mhm.
And then there's just that social component. Sometimes we have to sit around and talk with each other,
Mhm.
and tell the good stories and the fun stories and the bad stories and the funny stories, right? Of helping these families. So I think with anything that's meaningful to do in life, there's hard parts of it. But when you understand the mission of what you're trying to accomplish, then it's easy to get through those hard parts.
Yeah. So let me ask you then too, are there things that we could take care of now that would make this process easier? Like after I die, are there things I should be doing right now that will that will help out?
Great question. Yes, absolutely. And I tell everyone I talk to about this. So, first thing, if you have dependents, you have to have life insurance, right? If you're a mom or dad, you have young kids at home, you have to have life insurance. That's just part of your responsibility. Go get it. If you don't have it, go get it today. It's cheap, it's easy, just to get term. The next thing is get organized. Um, you know, there's online forms. In fact, we even offer uh, a free vault, digital vault called through EasyNet, and they can put in all their information and store it there. And when they pass away, the family knows, here's all the accounts, here's everything I own, here's all that. Some way, write it down, put it digitally. Here's my passwords. Get organized is really, really helpful. And then if you have any assets, you need an estate plan. Um, so um, if you have real estate, it needs to be in a trust. That's the best vehicle for transferring real estate through a generation that doesn't trigger taxes in most cases and will not trigger probate if it's funded correctly. Trusts are a couple $1,000 usually to set up. Sometimes you can do it for a couple hundred, depending on what you have to put in there. And it really solves a lot of problems for that family. And then the last thing I would say is, well, I'll say two things. The second and last thing I would say is setting up a funeral plan.
Mm.
I can't tell you how many families will get in just the worst fights because, dad just died and you have three kids all sitting around the table and saying, oh, I think dad wanted that. No, we can't afford that. Well, you didn't care about dad. That's why you're saying we can't afford it, right?
Mhm.
And all of a sudden they have to come up with $10,000 and they have to make all these decisions and they're emotional. Like you don't go to the grocery store when you're hungry and you don't plan a funeral when you're grieving. And if you can pre-plan that and you walk into the funeral home and they say, here's what your dad wanted. He made all the decisions and it's all paid for. And this is what your part is. You're going to be speaking. You're going to be pallbearer. Huge difference. What a gift to those kids.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, after getting organized, getting life insurance, organized, a funeral plan, and possibly a trust or a will, is the personal property. The personal property can cause so much fighting for families because you just lost someone. So you're grasping at anything to feel that connection again, right? And so stupid little things, pencils. I've had people fight because dad always wrote in his journal with this pencil and more than one kid wants it. And I have seen parents just like take a sticky note and put it on the back of a picture frame, put it on the back of a clock, put it in their gun case and say, I want Tommy to have this shotgun because I loved all the times we went duck hunting together, right?
Mm.
And now everyone's like, oh, I want Tommy to have that shotgun too. And when Tommy gets the shotgun, it means so much more than a shotgun. It fulfills that need that he wants of connecting. So I say throw some sticky notes on the most important things in your house. And even if it's only a few, all the other stuff, once you get one or two things, it seems to calm everyone down on, okay, I have something that's meaningful. I don't really care who has mom's shoes. Right?
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So even thinking about the key people who will
Yep.
want something and figuring out who should get what to make sure everyone has something similar, I guess, so it will
Yeah,
balance out. That could solve a lot of those issues.
absolutely. I've seen it work time and time again. And especially if there's a reason, right? The reason I want you to have the piano is because I loved how hard you worked to learn how the piano. It didn't come to you naturally. And I love that about you, that you work hard. Like that's three sentences on a sticky note. And what that does for someone who's grieving is amazing. So if
Yeah.
you can have the funeral plan in place, if you can have the estate issues in place and be organized, all that will take care of. And then with those few personal items, having that emotional connection can be so powerful for those kids.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good suggestion.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And then write down all of your auto pay accounts,
Right.
all the vitamins you're ordering to
Right.
let everyone
Any
know.
passwords, I mean, your Facebook, Instagram, like to close out a Facebook account, if you don't have that password, it you it is so hard to close that thing out. But if you have the password, you can just log in as them and close it, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of a cheat around it, but so what, right? Like that makes it so much easier for your family members. Write those down, do a digital vault somewhere where you just have a list of everything. This is everything that there is. When we run into situations like that, man, it makes our job easy, and it's so much less pressure on that family member.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Wow, this is wonderful advice. And
Thank you.
I'm happy to know about your company and the work you're doing, and that because it's all kind of virtual, like you're able to work all over the country.
Yeah.
And so that's really wonderful. So hopefully there'll be people who will hear this. I don't know if you need more business. It sounds like you're really busy, but
No, we love it. Our goal is to serve 500,000 families a year. And so we're nowhere near that. We're maybe 10,000 at this point. So we want to get to that point at some point, because it, whether you have a lot or little, just having someone with you in those next steps, it means so much to these families, and we're passionate about it.
yeah, well, that's really wonderful. And I'm glad now a lot more people know about it and know that this is available and possible to arrange. So I'll just remind everyone that your website, it's full-circlecare.com,
Right.
and the name of it is Full Circle Aftercare. And you're Matt Van
And I'm
Drimmelen.
Matt. Yep.
Yeah. So is it best for people to just go to the website if they want to connect with you or learn more?
Yep, absolutely. Go to the website. If they're a business, and they're looking to partner with us, they can email me, just Matt at full-circlecare.com. Um, and and if they're a family needing help, we have our toll-free number. They can call in, and we're happy to help them in almost any circumstance. We can help them in some level.
All right. Well, that's really fantastic. So thank you so much for taking time to answer all my questions and share your stories with me.
Thank you, Karen. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. I hope you learned a lot from my conversation with Matt, just as I did. And I wanted to say I am very touched to see what a difference his company is making for people who really need this help. Again, as I said, I wasn't really aware of how great the need was and how complicated some people's estates might be. And I am impressed with this great service for people who are grieving and who have little hope of finding their way through all of this paperwork. It's wonderful to know that Full Circle Aftercare is there for them. And I understand why funeral homes and hospices might be interested in contracting with this company and being able to offer their services to their clients for free. So I thought it was a great service, and I wanted you all to know about it and keep this in the back of your mind in case it's something you need someday or someone else you know who might benefit from this sort of help. So I'd like to remind you that if you enjoy the content of this podcast, be sure to tell other people about it. You can share individual episodes or even just help them discover it on their phones on the podcast app and learn how to subscribe or follow the podcast if you think they would also like to listen in. And wherever you happen to listen, be sure to subscribe yourself and then leave a rating and review, because that really helps the podcast rise up higher in the rankings and be more accessible to other people who are looking for this content. So I'll be back next week with another episode for you. And until then, remember that we're here for love. That is really what this life is all about, learning how to love bigger and deeper and more fully in our lives. So face your fear, be ready for whatever life brings you next, and love each and every moment of your very precious life. Bye-bye.